Hi, my name is Dave Hilowitz. So I write a lot of different kinds of music. I write rock songs, film music, instrumental stuff. This video is going to be focused mostly on rock music. So I've been writing songs for 20 years, something like that. And over the course of that time, I've learned a lot of things about how to write songs, both what works and obviously what doesn't. There are a lot of things that I wish I'd been told when I was just getting started that would have saved me years of frustration. So that's why I'm making this video series. In addition, I've come up with kind of like an organizational system, like just a way of working that helps me to write songs and stay organized, and I want to share that with you guys. Okay, let's get started. So there are a lot of different ways to write songs. Certainly the most obvious is just the head-on approach. You pick up a guitar, a violin, piano, whatever your instrument is, and you just sit there trying to come up with good chord progressions or good ideas, whatever. And I would say about a third of the time when I come up with like a musical idea, it comes from just kind of like screwing around with the instrument. At the same time, there are a bunch of downsides to working like that. If an idea doesn't come immediately, you can get frustrated, and that frustration can actually turn into panic, which is super unproductive. Another way of writing songs is to let your subconscious do the work. In other words, shower thoughts. Shower thoughts are solutions to problems that come when you're doing something that has absolutely nothing to do with the problem, like taking a shower. And in fact, in my experience, the shower is a great place to write songs. And now, back to the studio. My technique is kind of like a combination of both things. I'll generally, play my guitar for a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Either ideas will come or they won't, doesn't really matter. And then I'll put it down, I'll go about my day, just do something else, not necessarily taking a shower. And more times than not, an idea will just come to me like 15, 20 minutes after I've put down the instrument. So it's kind of like, consciously I work to get my mind in gear thinking about melody. But after that, the wheels are kind of in motion. And my mind is just laboring subconsciously, just doing some kind of melodic work. I'm not even necessarily aware of it. I think one of the things about working consciously with an instrument is that you're always judging yourself. And there's like a certain amount of self-doubt and a certain amount of judgment that's not necessarily that useful when you're just getting started with an idea. But when I'm doing something else like cleaning or opening mail or something, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I don't have enough bandwidth to like come up with melody ideas and also be worried about, some nebulous thing in the future. It's actually a much less stressful way to come up with ideas. So how do you actually go about doing this? If you're going to be like doing other stuff and hoping that melody ideas just pop into your head, you need to be ready to receive them. So that's our next tip. Always have your recorder with you. When I first got started doing this, there were no iPhones. I didn't have money for a mini disc player, so I was using one of these. And after a while, I was using one of these. And now, obviously, I use this. Having an iPhone has just like hugely improved the workflow for coming up with these ideas. As for what these recordings consist of, it's mostly just me singing like, either nonsense vocal noises or, dummy lyrics or something like that. When I get an idea, I'll often pace around my house with an iPhone like this. I find walking outside helps too, because when you're walking, you automatically have a tempo. One thing that I find really useful is generally when you come up with an idea, you have some notion of what the chords are behind that melody. You don't realize that you're doing this, but almost everybody actually thinks a little bit in terms of arrangement. If you can figure out what key the song is in, it's very useful to sing in the low root note of that key. If you have a guitar or piano near you, obviously it's also really, really helpful to like pick it up and try to figure out what the actual chords are as quickly as possible. When I first got started back in the microcassette days, I was in school. And I had this idea that I was just going to come up with all these melodies. And at the end of the semester, I was going to listen back to all of them. And I was going to decide which ones were the good ones and delete all the rest of them. Well, at the end of the semester, I listened back and I hadn't recorded guitar parts for any of them. And I hadn't figured out what the keys were for any of them. And it just sounded like nonsense. Like I couldn't figure out what the idea even was. It didn't help that the audio quality was really lousy on the microcassette recorder. But it's basically just like 4 months of like ideas that I had to throw away. So yeah, it's really important that you try to figure out what key that melody is in. And if you can figure out the chords, I mean, you're, 50% of the way there towards like having a bona fide part of an actual song. So So let's talk a little bit about the head-on approach, picking up a guitar and just, having at it, trying to write a song. One of the things that makes that so frustrating is a thing called muscle memory, which is essentially that you're too used to your instrument. I'm very, very prone to this. Basically, every time I pick up a guitar, I play the same kinds of chord progressions. Always start with an A major chord for some reason. I don't know why. It's just easy to play that bar chord. And lo and behold, I'm frustrated by the experience because everything I'm playing sounds the same. It's very hard to judge whether or not a song idea is good when you're in the process of writing it. And really, the only way we have as creators to do that is novelty. Basically, does it sound fresh and new? Later on, you can listen back to something and be like, hey, that was actually pretty good, or that was really lousy, I didn't realize it. But at the time, very hard. One of the things you're trying to do when you're coming up with songs is you're trying to impress yourself. You're trying to, there's a certain novelty that you're looking for, and you're never going to find that novelty if you're playing the same stuff all the time. It's important to remember that good songs are actually written by your brain, not by your instrument. In my opinion, the best place to do songwriting is actually pretty far away from an instrument, but if you're gonna use an instrument, try to switch it up a little bit. I've got like 8 guitars in this room. I've got a cello, and I have to say, the cello, which I made, is by far my favorite instrument for writing songs right now, and it's because I've only had it for 6 months. It sounds different. I can play the same idea on a guitar and it just wouldn't excite me in the same way, and I wouldn't even bother to keep it. So another thing that you can experiment with is non-standard layouts. I do a lot of composing on this thing, which is a Novation Launchpad, using some custom software, which I'll link to below. And basically, you can change the scale that you're working in, and as a result, the pads don't necessarily mean any one thing. You don't have the opportunity of developing that kind of muscle memory. And for me, it's been extremely productive to have the ball always moving a little bit. And the fact that like the ball is always moving a little bit means that I'm always out of my comfort zone. And that feeling of being like slightly outside of my comfort zone is really, really useful for coming up with new ideas. Another thing to remember about coming up with ideas is to take breaks often. You'll see that in like every list of tips for every creative person ever. It's so important. Our ability to gauge what is new and exciting just goes away after a certain amount of time. And you could be making the most amazing music ever and you wouldn't even know it after a certain point because you've just heard everything so much. And my final tip is try to listen back to your demos as quick as possible, either the same day or the day after you record them. The reasons for that are twofold. First, you want to delete the stuff that sucks. And let me tell you, you might be afraid of hearing something that's embarrassing or crappy or something like that. There is nothing that feels better than deleting something that isn't good. You want to know that you're actually filtering stuff out. It's way better to delete something at this point than to invest like 10 to 20 hours into recording an idea that isn't worth it. The second reason for doing this is that there's probably a lot more kicking around your head that you didn't manage to capture, either because you didn't have your instrument available or whatever, little backing parts, variations on the melody. There's that story I told up top about how, a few years ago, I basically lost 4 months worth of work. The reason for that is I basically didn't listen back. You can think of it a little bit like a filmmaker. Filmmakers shoot and then they look at dailies, which are basically like uncut footage from the day before. And it kind of allows them to know if they're heading off the rails or, if there's something that needs to be reshot or something that needs to be fixed. They can know sooner rather than later. So that's what you're doing. You're listening to the dailies. I think that's it. Next time, we're going to cover what to do when you actually have a bunch of song parts. How do you organize them? How do you stay sane? Because if you're capturing these ideas, pretty quickly, you're going to be inundated with little pieces of songs, and you're not going to know what to do with them. So stay tuned for that video. If you enjoyed this, and if you want to see more videos like it, make sure you hit subscribe so you can be notified. It's free, and you'll be notified when I make another one of these videos. Take care.